Good evening. Thank you, sir. I'm Nasser Yassin. I'm the Director of Research here in the Institute, the Issam Fares Institute for Public Policy and International Affairs. We're also using our, what Michael calls our audiovisual and media name as AUB Policy Institute. I'm very glad to welcome today Mr. Boris van der Ham. And Mr. Boris van der Ham is actually presenting and talking about a topic that is rarely discussed at, here in the AUB and in the Institute. So we're very glad to delve into challenging ideas and challenging subjects such as the experience of humanism and looking at the Dutch Humanist Experience. I'd like to welcome Mr. van der Ham, but also I want to welcome Her Excellency, Madame the Ambassador. She's been a frequent visitor to us, to the Institute, and we look forward to do more and more of such collaborations. What we will do today is we'll give you a floor for half an hour.
Yeah.
And then, but let me say a few words about you, and I'll give you the floor. Boris van der Ham is a humanist, writer, and politician. He's the president of the Dutch Humanist Association and has served as a member of the Dutch Parliament for 10 years. I read in another bio that he decided to step down from politics and take a break, which is very brave of you. And we'll probably give this experience to some of our politicians in Lebanon and the Arab world, because they don't step down unless they go to the grave, so unfortunately. In Parliament, Mr. van der Ham initiated several bills, including the one that abolished the ban on blasphemy and another concerning the referendum in 2005 about the European Constitution. In 2012, he decided to take a political timeout, where currently he has several roles as presidents, and his role in presidencies in the field of media, culture, human rights, education, and in the private sector. He is working or just premiered a documentary about Islam and atheism and entitled Among Non-Believers. Mr. van der Ham, I'll give you the floor.
Can I just say a few words?
Sure, please, of course. More than a few words.
Well, in the sense that I'm always very happy to be here at the Issam Fares Institute, but I think also it's good to mention that we as the Netherlands, we stick to our neutral agenda when it comes to Lebanon. It's in no way, because now of course we have the Dutch Humanist Experience. It was like 3 weeks ago that we had a lecture about our experience when it came to sectarianism and the pillarization of the Dutch system. And these, in our view, are just to give you and share with you the experiences that we have, and it's in no way to try and impose whatever kind of political system on you, because that's definitely not our agenda. But I'm very happy to have Mr. Boris van der Ham here, because he's well seasoned in the subject, and I think also the humanist experience is really about equality, it's about justice, it's about anti-discrimination, and it's about all these rights that we as the Netherlands and as the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs also try to stimulate as much as we can in Lebanon. So in that respect, I would recommend you also to take one of our leaflets for later. It gives an indication of what we do here in Lebanon, and that might give you some ideas. And if there's any questions left, our email addresses are on the back of it. So thank you very much, and have a very fruitful evening.
Thank you.
So, yes. Well, it's a big honor to be here. I had already had a discussion with some students about the hedonistic experiences in the Netherlands and the law system around it. So that was a very interesting discussion about Amsterdam and about the things that are going on there. So it was very nice, very good that you were here too. And I'm invited here to talk about humanism and about well, the way the Dutch system works in terms of belief system, freedom of religion, belief, but also about a kind of humanist tradition in the Netherlands. And well, this is of course very known, the cheese and the Dutch flag. I don't know if you know the Dutch flag, but aside from our our wooden shoes, our tulips, our cheese. I think a lot of people will associate the Netherlands with freedom. Not only the freedom of Amsterdam, but also the freedom of speech and those kind of things. So I think this is also, next to the cheese, our identity. And this is, as you can see, and that was, of course, for the ambassador, who is the representative of the king in the Netherlands, in Beirut. This is our king and our queen with his daughters, and it was the day of his installation as a king in the Netherlands. And here you can see a kind of, it's the royalty is the biggest guy in our country, and he was attending on the day that he was getting king, the biggest DJ in the world, DJ Armin van Buuren. So everybody, he was here last summer, like rave music, and the king on his day was dancing. Huh?
He's more known at level than the king.
Yes, he's more known than the king, I think. So, but this is very interesting. This is in a way the freedom to dance, and it's really a part of the identity that the king chooses to show on the day that he became king. Even on trade missions, and the ambassador can be a witness of that. This kind of cultural freedom, those kind of things are getting with the king when they are on a trade mission to foreign countries. So it's interesting that this freedom, maybe a little bit of hedonism, is part of even a royal feast in the Netherlands a few years ago. Humanism, freedom, part of Dutch culture, part of Dutch identity. What is the history about that? What is the history about democracy, the freedom that we have in the Netherlands? And what can us teach that about other discussions we have around the world? What's maybe a strange picture to show this. We have the Netherlands on this side, how it is now. And this is the Netherlands when there would be no water system, no dikes in the Netherlands. And in a way, you can see how important dikes, water management is in the Netherlands. And you can ask, why? What has that to do with democracy? And what has that to do with freedom? Well, I think a lot, because one of the first things that were established in the Netherlands were kind of a cooperation between farmers, between people, to make those dikes. And it was already in the 12th, 13th century. People were negotiating about how are we going to keep our country dry. And that was a common interest. If you wouldn't work together, you would have your feet wet. That was a very bad thing. So there were a lot of discussions, and a lot of people in the Netherlands were very outspoken at that moment, like there are now still. They were yelling at each other, cursing each other, but at the end of the day, they had to agree to say, what are we going to do? What kind of dikes are we building? What kind of place are we going to make wet and dry? So democracy started with a very practical thing. One of the first democratic things that were people working together was to keep our country dry. In free thinking about the idea history in the Netherlands, one person is very important, but not only for the Netherlands, but I think for the world. That's the person called Erasmus, Desiderius Erasmus. He was born in the Netherlands, and he was he was Roman Catholic. He was religious, absolutely, but he was calling himself also a humanist. And why was he calling himself a humanist? Because he was not only inspired by the Bible, by God's word, but also was inspired by all kind of other works that was discovered in those period of times, like the classical works of the philosophers in Rome, in Greece, other kind of philosophers. And of course, the Bible was very important for him, but the other books were important too. And he was inspired by other humans, you can say that. And that's, you can say the explanation of the word humanist. It was nothing that had nothing to do with atheism or something. It was just, being inspired by other works of other humans. And he was very critical, by reading all those books, not only one, of the ideas of that time. He was critical towards to the Roman Catholic Church. He was a member of the Roman Catholic Church, but he was criticizing it. He even wrote a book that was very criticized and criticizing the Roman Catholic Church on all their faults and their mistakes. And he did that from a perspective that everything that is on earth should be criticized, and by criticizing, by debating certain things, you get a better answer, a better reality. That was the basis of his ideas. And one of the persons that humanists from that period were inspired by were people like Socrates or Plato. People in the Dark Ages, it's called, those philosophers were a little bit forgotten, but those were on the podium again. They were discussed. It was part of the intellectual debate of that time. Make another jump towards the 16th century. The Netherlands was a part of the Spanish Empire, and Roman Catholicism was the main religion. But there were a lot of ideas in Western Europe, in the rest of Europe, about the Roman Catholic Church, and there were mistakes. People were, discussing the idea of buying off your sins and those kind of things. So there were other groups standing up, Protestants, for example, who said, we want to see it differently, or people who said, well, I want to stay Catholic, but I want to, change certain policies of church and certain policies of the state. This is William of Orange, the last name you can recognize from our national football team, of course. It's still Orange, and he is called the Dutch father of the fatherland. He is also the family related to our current king. And he was a politician. He changed his religion to Protestant, but that was just for financial reasons. He wanted to marry a rich woman, and he was very flexible in those kind of things. But he was also in favor of religious freedom, and he was challenging the king of Spain, Philip II, in his policies to punish people who were thinking differently, who were apostates from the Roman Catholic Church. And there were a lot of other political reasons why he was discussing with the Spanish king. But this was one of the reasons that he was very critical about that king. And in the 60s of the 16th century, there started a civil kind of war towards this king in 70s, 80s. And at the end of that discussion, William of Orange declared that the King of Spain was somebody who was not respecting the personal views of people. And he said, you have to respect the freedom of conscience in a country. So whether you're Catholic or Protestant, it's your own choice. And he was opposing that. And in Geneva, in a country called Switzerland, you all know, there's even a big monument for the Reformation, and William of Orange is there, and you can see his statue here. And in the Dutch, there's a quote from his statement when he had criticized the Spanish king about this freedom of conscience. So in the world history, William of Orange was one of the founding fathers of the Reformation, one of the people who was rejecting this king, and had a very good, very important stand on this issue. So after the Dutch went from this part of Europe, from this king, Philip II, we became a kind of independent. And there was a kind of religious freedom in the Netherlands. But it was not completely free. The Protestant church was the main church. And the Catholics were allowed, but they had to be silent. And of course, there were a lot of ideas about religion. Of course, a lot of Protestants thought, we are the best, we have the best ideas about religion. And this wonderful painting that's in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, it's called the Soulfishes. And it's really interesting that the Protestants were kind of to fish out the Catholics to the good side. And if you're on the good side, there's, as you can see on the painting, you see a lot of trees and wealth. And if you're on the Catholic side, you're poor and you're bad. So there was religion freedom, but of course there was a lot of opinions about each other's religion. Jews were also allowed in the Netherlands, but they were very restricted in what they could do. They were not able to have certain jobs in the Netherlands, but they were allowed. And this is actually one of the books from the Portuguese synagogue in Amsterdam. And in this book, Spinoza was sentenced to be excommunicated from the synagogue in Amsterdam because he had some views about religion that was not accepted by the Jewish community. And as you know, Spinoza was called by them an atheist. He said, there's no personal God. God is nature. And by saying that, he was considered an atheist. And, people were really against that kind of views. And so there was a lot of debate about theology, about religion, between religion, but also inside religion. There was a big debate in the Protestant church between Calvinists and people who had a more liberal view on the Bible, and that ended in the murder or the death sentence of one of the major politicians on that moment, Johann van Oldenbarneveld. That's in 1619. So there was a lot of discussion. There was freedom of conscience in a way, but there was a lot of political debate. Another leap, because I'm not going to tell everything about Dutch history. In 1814, the Netherlands was just released from French occupation, and the French took some ideas from the French Revolution to our political system. So we had a kind of separation between church and state. There were some other important changes made in the Dutch political system. And when this is a picture of the king, the Prince of Orange came back to the Netherlands because he fled from the Netherlands. He came back, and our current kingdom was founded. And with the new constitution, there was freedom of religion for everybody. So where the Jews and the Catholics were before second-hand civilians, from that moment on, everybody was treated equally for the law. And that was established because at that moment, the Netherlands decided to be a secular country, to be separation between church and state. So I always say, people who say, secularism is opposing religion, I always say, from the moment that the Netherlands became a secular country, all the religions were treated equally, like Jews and the Catholics. So, that happened in 1914 and on. Although we were a secular country, there was a lot of discussion about religion, because a lot of people in the Netherlands were religious, were Protestant, Catholic, a few of them were Jewish, but everybody was attending a church at that moment. It was a very religious country in the 19th century. But there was also people who said, we oppose religion, or organized religion. Where people saying, we know that the influences of the Pope or of reverends, it's bad, it's not good. Organized religion was under fire from social democrats, from communists, from liberals also. And you see on this are two newspapers from the 19th century. And you see that God is disappearing here. In 1931 it was, so this was from the 20th century. And here you see a newspaper, the Dageraad, Daily Rise of the Day, that was very atheist, and it was considered by this right man as the devil. Atheism, being critical on religion, it's all very bad. So there was a lot of discussion. There was a rising people who were not attending the organized religion, and there was a lot of discussions between them. And of course, there was a lot of discussion between the religions too, but that was the topic of the ambassador who told how they coexisted with each other by, allowing themselves to have their own systems inside the Dutch democratic system. Another big leap. We are in 1946. 1946, just after the Second World War, we had an occupation by the German Nazis, and a lot of people were, shocked by all the things that happened, of course. And a growing number in the Netherlands was not going to church anymore, were not religious anymore, or were not into the organized religions anymore. So some people during the war thought we have to build new organizations, a new framework, a new life stance that is out of the church. An organization for so-called in Dutch buitenkerkelijke. It's translated literally like out of the church. And that's not only for people who are non-religious, but also people who don't want to be inside an organized religion anymore. And it was called het Humanistisch Verbond, the Humanist Organization, the HV, Humanistisch Verbond, Humanist Alliance. And they had, in a way, this was the founder of it, Jaap van Praag. He was, kind of the leader of the organizations for a couple of decades. And this was their magazine, Humanistisch Verbond. And if you look at the pictures, you also see what their goals was. To try to, from a humanist point of view, to let people grow, like to help people to make something of their lives, to prevent nihilism, because a lot of people after the Second World War were afraid that people would fall into pessimism, nihilism, just to consume and, just work and no reflection on life. So this Humanistisch Verbond was trying to give some life stance, aside from organized religion, aside from believing in God maybe, to say, well, there are other inspirational things that can give a course to your life. That was the idea, a life stance inspired by human nature, by humanism. The other thing was, the other reason that they built this organization was that people who are not organized in organized religion were discriminated. You were not treated equally. Certain jobs in the Netherlands you couldn't get if you were not religious. You were treated differently. I always tell the story that if you were in the army, and we had then an army that every guy had to attend when they were 18, then you have every Sunday a religious hour, and you could attend the priest or the Protestant reverend, and if you were not religious, you could brush the toilets. So the humanist organization, well, that's not really giving respect to people who are not want to attend the organized religions. So there were humanist chaplains installed in the beginning of the 60s to have some even-handedness towards those people. So that was one of the goals, to have equal treatment. Don't try to read this all because it's very complex. But this was this is the tree, you can say, where the humanist organization, Humanistisch Verbond, tried to build a kind of a pillar inside a very religious society at that moment. We talk about the 40s and the 50s, to have a kind of pillar for people who are not affiliated to organized religion. So there was a humanist, development organization. There was a humanist welfare organization. There was also introduced a humanist broadcasting organization. So all kind of things were established, but also people who worked in the army who went with people towards to missions. For example, here, this is in Lebanon, when there was people working here from the Netherlands, from the UN perspective, peacekeepers, and there was also a humanist chaplain, a humanist counselor, who was counseling the guys and some girls maybe, what they experienced there. But also in educational issues, that was the last, that was this slide. On public schools, humanists said, we want to also discuss with young people morality and what is the depth of freedom. We want to discuss that. So there were humanist counselors also in our public schools to discuss about freedom, those kind of things. So they tried to give humanism some hands and feet to have this alternative life stance. So the present. How is the humanist organization doing now? Well, I already said that the interesting thing is that on this moment, if you are a humanist, you are treated. Also, the Dutch humanists are treated the same as every other life stance. So one of the things that we accomplished the last 70 years was that whether you're an atheist or a humanist or Catholic or Muslim, you're treated by the law equally. So when the king was crowned a few years ago, not only the archbishop was invited, and the Muslims and the Jews and everything, but also the Humanist Alliance. And that's, of course, nice to go there for your person, because it's a nice thing to be there, but it's also very symbolical, because in a lot of parts of the world, to be an atheist or to be a non-believer or to be not affiliated to an organized religion, you are treated backwards. So the case that in the Netherlands, after 70 years of struggle, you are treated equally, it's not only fun, it's very important that there is even-handedness in how you're treated. So that's very important. By law, people are treated equally. That's very important. And the other way is that humanism is still trying to give an alternative, inspirational things for people who want to get inspired by things. So, for example, this is the Humanist Canon. That's all kind of information on our website about philosophy, about free thinking, but also about the history of that. So that's very interesting. This is the site, actually, that is found on Google the most and is attended by people on the internet the most, because they find that very inspiring. We also do projects on schools about human rights, a humanopoly about human rights, how different human rights are in the world, and that they are aware that you have to stand up for freedom and not only think that it's taken for granted. And of course, in society, there are still problems, because although from the government there's a lot of freedom, there are still a lack of freedom sometimes between people. We have vertical freedom from the government, but horizontal freedom, that's still an issue. For example, this is a newspaper where the headline is Muslims want to kill another a Muslim because she started a wine bar. Because she had some death threats by people in the Netherlands because she wanted to start a wine bar. And because some people say, well, as a Muslim, you cannot start something with alcohol, that's forbidden. So, of course, this is not every day the headline in the country, in the Netherlands, but she's not threatened by state, but by other people in society. So one of the things that we do as Dutch humanists is to discuss those kind of unfreedom in our society on a social basis. Of course, we address when there are difficulties with freedom, the state, but also we try to organize discussions with Muslims, with free thinkers, with ex-Muslims, with all kind of things, that we see as a problem for freedom in practical use every day, like, for example, the thing we just saw. We also organized, as a humanist organization, in an international umbrella organization. It's called the IHU, International Humanist and Ethical Union. It's actually founded by Jaap van Praag, the founder of the Dutch Humanists, but it's now currently based in London. And they try to address the freedom and humanist values on an international level. For example, the IHU is represented in the Human Rights Council in Geneva. And they try to, well, get on the political agenda that there's, of course, there's freedom of belief, or freedom of religion, but there's also freedom of belief. There's also freedom of apostasy. There's also freedom of speech. There's also freedom to change your religion towards another religion. So that's a very important thing to organize with other free thinkers, humanists around the world to protect that freedom also. And it's very difficult because you know, a lot of people who are humanists, they are free thinkers, so they, in general, they are not willing to organize themselves. They say, why, you know, I left maybe a religion, why should I join a new organization of people who want to have freedom? You know, that's a little bit paradoxical. And I would say, well, if you're not organizing yourself around freedom, then the people who organize themselves around unfreedom will get stronger than you. So this is, for example, it was in Oxford 2 years ago. There was a gathering of the IHU and of the British humanists, where a lot of other humanists around the world were there. And it was one of the biggest events ever held in the world around humanism. And it was very nice. It was very interesting to see a lot of people organizing freedom. And it's very important to that, because one of the things that we do as international humanists is to try to make people who are silenced in the public debate most of the times, we try to get them on the podium. In a lot of countries, also in this part of the world, the Middle East, there are very you know, there's a lot of dictatorship and those kind of things, a lot of unfreedom, but there are very proud and very courageous people who are fighting unfreedom. For example, Raif Badawi in Saudi Arabia, other organizations around the world who wants to stand up. And every year we publish with the IHU and the Humanistisch Verbond a report, the Freedom of Thought report, where we show what the position of free thinkers is in the world, and where laws are very bad. Of course, you can see that in China, but also in Saudi Arabia, you can see how it is. And you know, to have some hierarchy in how they are treated. You can say it's a little bit strange, maybe, as a humanist, to only stand up for people who are, for example, atheists. But my view is that if you defend the right to be a non-believer, and you guarantee that in every law, also socially, it guarantees also the basic freedom of religion. Because, for example, in China, that's an atheist country, atheist communist country. But even there, it's not easy to be a Roman Catholic. So a few months ago, I was in China. I asked if I could talk to the Roman Catholic Church there, and he invited me, and I said, well, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God. But I want to defend your right to be religious in this atheist country. Because I think that you have the fundamental right to be a non-believer of the atheist system. And not the way that I want to be a non-believer to maybe a religious system. So even if you're an Orthodox Muslim, or even if you are an Orthodox atheist, or a Catholic or Protestant, or whatever you are, we are all protected by the right to be a non-believer in the view of someone else. So protecting this right is serving us all, I want to say. So one of the things that we did in the Netherlands, it's a very nice picture of myself. We tried to have those reports to our embassies and to our politicians. We also support organizations abroad. For example, organizations in Turkey. This is a Turkish organization that is very courageous in standing up against Erdogan and those kind of people. Yeah, and then the future. What is the future of humanism? Well, we don't know, of course. We cannot look into the future. But one of the things that we see in the Netherlands is that the Netherlands is one of the most secularized countries in the world. So like 60% of the people are not, 55% of the people are not affiliated to religion anymore. And even the people who are calling themselves religious, they don't go to church. Even we have 800,000 people who are from a Muslim background. Lots of them are not going to the mosque. So that's going on. But at the same time, we see that people are trying to find some inspirational things, inspiration in other things. So we still have, like in 1946, the problem of nihilism, of pessimism. So I think there is still a need for a kind of, inspiration from humanistic background or those kind of things, that we talk about moral values in the politics, but also in society itself. So I think the need in a free society to talk about things of what is the morality of freedom, what are the dilemmas, what are the borders, what are those kind of things. It's still there are a lot of people who are really interested in that, and I think that's part of the future. And another part of the future is still to be aware that freedom is something that you have to work on constantly. So the freedom we have now in the Netherlands, you can't take that for granted. You have to defend freedom, and you have to also stand up for freedom in other parts of the world and be solidaire with people who are not free. So I think that's part of the future. There's standing weerbaar humanisme, that's strong humanism. That to work together to have a humanism and the human values established everywhere in the world, I think that's still a goal that we can embrace. I don't know if you know this. I want to because maybe that's a bridge to the discussion we can have towards the Lebanon situation. A few years ago in the United Nations, there was a discussion about the Red Cross and the other symbols that we have. And they made the crystal, the red crystal, and you know this symbol as an alternative for all the religious things, and maybe that's something that's also maybe for something for the future, that you say, whatever your lifestyle is, whatever your religion is, and whatever if you're orthodox or free thinking, we all have something to gain with common ground. In freedom, in mutual freedom, in a secular state. And the secular state is not a state that is promoting atheism or something else. No, it's a kind of neutral state that says, well, we have a platform that we give everybody equal right to make their own mind up, what they want to believe or not want to believe, or that they want to have a kind of postmodern combination of all kind of things, that you can be inconsistent also. Because that's your fundamental freedom. And I think maybe under the flag of this red crystal, we can be both Muslim, free-thinking Muslim, atheist, whatever you want. And I think that's also a perspective that is hopefully in the future to be achieved. So thank you so much. Yes.
We'll keep this here. So you will.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting, and I like the way you also, distinguish that this is not necessarily the secular state promoting atheism. So let's open this and see if people who live in Lebanon and know the Lebanese context and Lebanese activists and scholars, whether they see this as relevant or how this can be actually enlighten some of the discussions we do about secularism in Lebanon and the move from sectarianism. Last month or so, we did with the ambassador a talk about the political system in Holland and the different ways of looking at, ways of including different groups in the political system and how to take in consideration different beliefs, including religious, but also social and non-religious or non-sectarian beliefs. So, and then this brings also fresh air and fresh, discussion about such ideas. So I'll open the floor and see what my colleagues and friends can talk. Yes, let's take 3 questions or 2 questions,
course,
maybe.
yes.
Let's take 2 questions and then, please.
Okay, there's the roadmap that you showed us. There was a pistachio country in Africa. Pistachio color.
Pistachio in Africa?
Green.
Yes. I thought it was...
Was that the country that's the most open?
No.
Most secular? Or?
No, there were a few countries that are in the law very liberal. So this survey, this report is only giving insight of what the state is doing and what kind of laws there are. So in some countries they have blasphemy laws, for example, who are not working. For example, in Denmark, they have a blasphemy law, but it's not working there. So they have the same law as, for example, in Pakistan. And of course, in Pakistan, the blasphemy law is a real big problem for not only non-believers, but also to Christians, for free-thinking Muslims also. So, it's every map and every list is always a little bit questionable because there are also a lot of nuances to that. But this Freedom of Thought report only reports on what is actually in the law about free thinking and about freedom of thought. So that explains that there are only a few who have their laws in shape. For example, the Netherlands is called in shape, but even in the Netherlands, as I already mentioned, there are social problems for freedom among religious groups. So no system is ideal. Yeah.
Basically, I think to get to where Holland is at the moment, or where the humanist thinking is, you would agree with me that you have to have proper democracy first in order to earn that freedom, in order to be able to think in this third dimension, or in the dimension of the non-believer versus the believer. In Holland, I think when you first mentioned in the first slide, you had a common purpose for the whole nation, and that is really not getting wet. In countries like Lebanon, we don't seem to have that as a common purpose in order to build a country that's been suffering under, let's say, lots of civilizations passing through, leaving a mark, and then dividing in order to rule. And I think really to start the whole thing in the process of democracy, you need this first spark. And the spark to cause countries like Lebanon or in the Middle East to go in that direction, I don't see them yet. I mean, there is no common purpose between the population in Lebanon to build a fantastic model for democracy, and then to go over to the humanistic thinking of earning all those freedoms. And this is, I find, very interesting, as where do we go to find that initial spark?
Yeah, that's of course not easy for me to
to
get the answer to that. But I think there are, in a way you can say that one of the problems of the Netherlands is now that people try to explain or to find a common ground now, because a lot of freedoms and a lot of wealth is taken for granted by people. And one of the things that people are discussing now, also considering the refugee crisis, part of refugees are coming to the Netherlands, is not only the crisis of people coming here and you have to allocate them, but also the crisis of inside the country, like who are we, and what do we want, and what do we want to say to people who come new to our country, and to say, well, this is our culture. What is that then? So I think when the very practical side of we don't want to have our feet wet, that's a very practical. That's a good incentive to work together. But I think one of the more moral and more non-economical discussions we have on this moment is what can bind us together. And of course our football team can, and maybe the royal family can sometimes. Those kind of things, or when something really bad happens, to a disaster, then we all stick together. But at other moments, there's a lot of diversity, and people, they think, we want to have something to hold us together. So, of course, in a completely different way from Lebanon, we sometimes face the same problems. But I think it's true that you first have to have some basic law system, that you can be equal rights, individual rights. That's very important to start with that. And I think I've been very short to Lebanon, but I've talked to several people here, and a lot of people from different backgrounds will say, the system, what we have here, is more based on groups and sects, and it's not. It's not representing the reality of our society anymore. So I think the common ground can be, we want to change this system, maybe, and we want to go to a more individual-based, one man, one vote system, something like that. Because I heard that among a lot of kind of groups, and I think that can be a common ground to say, well, we want, whatever your life stance is, whatever your religion is, we want to change that. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah, we will see.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. There is something that strikes as interesting, is how the humanist approach looks at more civil and political rights, like freedom of expression and thought. And within my field, I'm interested in sexual and reproductive rights. So what happens? What's the relation? Because you said something now, which is what binds us together. Sometimes you might have all these sects, but they are binded together against, let's say, LGBT rights or abortion.
Yeah.
So what's the humanist intake on that?
Well, in those issues, the humanists are very, in the last 70 years, very into the individual right of people. So, for example, the right that people can marry to the one who they love, whether that's somebody from the other sex or the same sex. That's something that has been advocated by my organization, but also a freedom of choice for women's rights. When in the 50s, it was still, if you were raped in your marriage, then your husband, or your man when you were raped by your wife, it was not. There was a problem with prosecution on that because you owned your partner, and that's changed in the beginning of the 90s. But also abortion, about other rights of women. In the 50s, it was still the case that you only could buy something in a shop if it was approved by your husband. So that was only like in the 50s in the Netherlands. So it changed in that period. So that those kind of things that were very advocated by the humanists too. So they're advocating that as a personal choice. If you choose yourself for that, then you should make that choice.
How do you see the humanist approach being applied in Lebanon, where still the new domestic violence bill allows for marital rape and LGBT people from the LGBT community are being persecuted all the time.
Yeah, well, it's clear what I think about that. I think it's very important that should change from and not from I think in the Human Rights Declaration of the United Nations, the individual right of persons, whether you're a man or a woman, it's established there, and it's not something that is only for people who are now having that. Some people in the West. It's a universal declaration of human rights. So it's also for people everywhere in the world. So, yeah, of course, I support that. Yes, and I heard about the marriage law that you only can have marriage with somebody from your own religion. You know, one of the things that you could say to everybody, you have the freedom to marry in the mosque or in the church, but have a civic marriage too, so that you can marry whatever you want. Yeah. Other questions or remarks?
Yeah, let me ask you a question about what Europe calls now the refugee crisis.
Yeah.
Although it's in numbers, it's nothing compared to what we're having in Lebanon and the region. But the freedom in Europe, and in the case in Holland, in Netherlands, is actually giving way for a lot of radicalization or radical voices to be voiced so openly, and this is actually creating or getting some followers for those on the very right wing in the political spectrum. And we see this is rising a lot in Europe, in Holland, in Netherlands, but also in Germany, in France. Also, you hear voices in Britain now with those people who are advocating for exiting the EU and so on. So it's so the refugee crisis is used at the moment because of freedom of expression and expression and the open freedom in Europe, actually to really rally those who are to the right wing in the political spectrum. And this is, in my opinion, shaking a lot the European project that's open and free. What's your take on this from Holland, being also a politician?
I'm not a politician anymore, so I won't take a stand from a political point of view, but I want to put a stand from the humanist point of view. I think humanism stands for that you stand up for fellow other humans, So it's if people are in need, if people flee, then your first reaction should be, I think, how can we help you? And sometimes we can help to give money to good camps in the Middle East, and sometimes it can also be to have some people in the Netherlands or other parts of Europe. So that's first. Second, I think it's very important to have this humanistic approach, that you are able to connect with the other persons who come in. And I think a lot of discussion we have, for example, in the Netherlands, is that we have had big camps inside very small villages, and that people are protesting that because they say, it's too much. We cannot relate to the people who come in. So, and I think first you have to take that serious. To say, how can we make an interhuman approach possible towards people? So I will always say, it's good to have people in Europe and to, but be aware that it has to be absorbed by the society, and that if it's dehumanized by only talking about numbers, then people cannot make that attachment. I think there's a lot of people who say, well, when they have a small amount of people who have who are in their village or something, they get acquainted, and then it's okay, and a lot of people can absorb that. So first say that, and first take that problem and also that feeling seriously, and then of course people are generalizing in general. They're talking about they're all bad people, they're all terrorists, or that's dehumanizing them too, because of course among some of the refugees there will be one or two or more terrorists. There will be people who are here from economical reasons. That's always the case. Don't deny that. Have an open discussion. But the majority of people who are coming here, they have or here in the Netherlands, not here, they have serious problems, and we have to take them seriously. So I think the best answer to people or to politicians who dehumanize people is to take real issues serious and to have a humanist approach by advocating honesty about the numbers, about who they are, about the humanist approach of absorb capacity, and I think also the loud voices are always the extremes, and I think people who are more in the middle, who are more nuanced, should be a little bit louder maybe, because otherwise you will leave the debate only to the extremes. And I don't want to, because I'm in favor of freedom of choice. So if you want to have an extreme opinion about whatever you want, say it. So, but if you have a more moderate view, be a little bit louder too. So don't blame someone else who is using his freedom of speech. Maybe sometimes blame yourself that you don't have, that you don't feel the urge to have your other opinion towards it. So a louder voice for the moderates is, and everywhere in the world, it's very important. Yeah.
Is it possible actually that after the Second World War and after splitting the state from religion, it seems to me that in Europe, let's say, the economy has become really the most important thing to cherish. So all the Europeans, or especially the Dutch probably, have hard-earned rights in their economy. And the populism comes at the moment when there is a threat to that hard-earned right in the economy and in the standards of living in Europe. This makes the job of a humanist a bit more difficult, where religion could have helped as well, because if you go back to the rules of the church and of religion, to love thy neighbor, to be charitable, etc., this has moved away. It's no longer anybody abides by that. They don't follow those kind of teachings. To be more compassionate to the poor and to be more compassionate. The economy is really ruling at the moment, and it could be that humanistic movement has gone to the other direction, whereas, you know what I mean? I mean, if 60% are no longer, let's say, religious, and there are I wouldn't say they are praying for the economy, but they are right in defending the hard-earned standards of living.
Yeah, but
this is what causes probably the friction and populism.
Well, well, there is a fact that a lot of, for example, Western Europe, we have a lot of social security. People are paying for that to have a good life insurance, illness insurance, and when you're those kind of things. And of course, if people come in, that's giving for the system a problem. It's not only the economy; it's also the social security net. That's it's challenged by my new people. So that's the thing. It's not only capitalism or something. It's also the ideas of social democracy. About the system that we build in a lot of countries. So it's not only capitalism, it's also social democracy that's, wrestling with this. It's not the case, I think, that people are less solidaire with other people when they are not religious anymore. That's not the case. A lot of people in the Netherlands are doing voluntary work in sport clubs and those kind of things. So that's not the case. It's more like if you are working in a field that's under fire because of globalization, that can give uncertainty in a way. And if you are living in a neighborhood, for example, where a lot of people are speaking another language or have another background, that can give a lot of uncertainty or a kind of feeling of that you lose your home or something. So that you have to take that seriously, I think. But I already said that that to rethink what free-thinking people in the Netherlands can bind together, that's one of the challenges of our free society. That's absolutely true. What is instead of economics? What is instead of the so-called rights we have? That's difficult. What is our national identity? What do we ask from people who come here? I think that's maybe lacking in this moment.
It's quite evident, really. Sorry.
Yeah, to give everybody the floor. Yeah, we will discuss that later. Go on. Yeah.
I have two questions that are a bit more philosophical. First one is, what is the limit of the humanist school? Because you're talking about freedom. Is there ever a limit? And the second one is, so we're talking about complete freedom. How does the humanist school cope with a political system? And especially in Europe, where you have leftist systems where the governmental machinery or skeleton is bigger.
Yeah.
Does this mean, if they cannot cope with this system, does it mean that the humanist school leans more towards anarchism, or what is the political system in which the school can survive at its best, let's say? Or how can you cope with the system?
Yeah, first, your question: are there boundaries to freedom? Yes, there are. If you take two elements of freedom, that is one: you have personal freedom; you can choose your own life, and you have the freedom that you have the rule that you can hurt someone else. It's the harm principle, that you can harm someone else, and those kind of things. They're like oh, that's simple. But if you take those two things very seriously, it's giving itself restrictions. For example, if you are free to choose your own life, and you have to respect someone else, then you have to make some certain rules about how you organize that. About schools, about how you do the traffic, of course. To make it very simple, if you say you cannot hurt someone else, it gives also in itself rules of responsibility. You cannot do anything. If you're in business and you think, I have a business and I want to pollute the whole earth, then you're hurting somebody else. So we have to have certain rules about pollution, for example. I take it very simple. So from those very simple rules of freedom of choice for yourself and not hurting someone else, you can achieve a whole system of, about rules and restriction also. And I think by that, it's a very rich principle to think of, because it's throwing up its own dilemmas. At what age are you able to choose your own life? Is that 12? Is that 18? Is that 21? Is that, you can have a discussion about that. We know from science that children are developing until 21 as a child, for example. They are really mature in their bodies from 21. So if you take science serious, you can discuss about age of when to drink or not. It's in the principle itself. You can talk about international politics. Of course, we have free trade, but if you I'm in favor of free trade. But if you leave all the garbage of society towards other parts of the world, or if you see that your freedom is not hand in hand with the freedom of other parts of the world, then out of that there comes certain policy. So from those very simple principles, there's a rich world of dilemmas, but also very clear rules, what you can do and what you can't.
But this at the same time there's a lot of room for action. First question is, does this come from a moralist can't work on morality? Is this where you originate these two principles? Is this where the humanist school took this principle from Immanuel Kant and let's say the only thing you cannot do is harm another person? But and how can you cope with a system that is so big and so complicated and put so many restrictions while just being a humanist? So, I don't know if it makes sense.
Well, this we're going to discuss Kant and all.
Yes.
There are a lot of there's a lot of roles. There are a lot of writers and philosophers who think about the concept of freedom and how far your responsibility is going. Of course, so you can have an endless debate about that. But I think at the end, if you take it from the simple principles of freedom, you can get very far in a kind of regulating that freedom by taking freedom seriously. So freedom is not like there's no limits. No, of course not. Of course not. Of course not. But I don't have to import some lifestyles from outside to come to that conclusion. If you take freedom itself seriously, it's limiting itself. If you take it really seriously, and there are a lot of philosophers who talked about it, like Kant and everybody. And for example, my organization, Humanist Organization, is a lifestyle organization. So sometimes we are very activists, like freedom of thought, and stand up for free thinkers. But we have a lot of political branches in our organization. We have very dark red socialists, but also very liberal persons. So left wing, right wing, all of it. And they are very different on certain political issues, but they are all stand for human values and for individual freedom. And that's I think I was in party politics for a long time, and I find it very refreshing to work together on issues through all those political differences. I work together with social democrats and socialists. I'm a liberal myself when I was in parliament. That's refreshing, to work together on other issues than just party politics. The sects we also have in the Netherlands, like, oh, you're from that party, or you're bad because you're from that party. Sometimes it's good to have those kind of discussions, but for the basic principles of society, you should, there are more things that you have in common than that are separating each other.
You have two questions?
Just want to, with the changing demographics of the Netherlands, I'm just want to know where the humanists now stand as far as the wearing of the burqa and integration into France.
Well, the burqa is a very big dilemma because, in a way, you can say, if you want to make the choice as a woman to wear that, then that's your individual freedom. But on the other hand, it limits also others to see you and feel safe. At the end, if you are not able to see someone else, you avoid personal contact. That can give a sense of unease. On the other hand, to follow that word unease, it's not a problem in a society, in a free society, to unease each other a little bit. I'm uneased constantly by somebody's hair, that they have hair, because I'm very jealous of that. But I'm very, it's in a free society. It's also good to be uneased at certain times. So, because of that reason, I would say, all right, we can allow a burqa. But if somebody says in a restaurant, I don't want in my restaurant somebody with a burqa because I want to see the people who come in, or in a train station, I think, well, they have the right to say, well, you cannot enter the building, but you can say, well, in the public space, we have to allow this unease because we are a free society. But I say that that's my personal sentiment. I'm like just on the verge of saying no, but it's a real dilemma. And the other thing is, what's more practical one, if you forbid it can also be an incentive to further radicalization. That's another thing. But I know that a lot of humanists, also in my organization, will say, well, I flip the other side. I say, this is too much. So my personal stance is that I flip that just on the verge of, okay, but at the same time, in the public debate, I want to criticize the burqa very much. So so in a law system you can say, well, okay, it's allowed, and at the same time I want to discuss the burqa as very unwelcome way of expressing your religious views. So one thing doesn't hurt the other. The other thing is about integration. It's a complex thing. I think it's very important that you find some common ground and that you don't think that everything can be discussed, like women's rights, equal rights for straight and gay, that you are stand up for the rights for someone else. I think that's the basics of integration. A lot of people embrace that. And some are not, and some are also, there are new surveys about that, are very in the middle or in doubt of that. I think you have to agree on certain issues very strongly, and if you are agreeing on that, then you can be very different. So the multicultural society, it's a fact, we have a lot of cultures. But I'm not in favor of multiculturalism, that is saying anything goes. You know, I think multicultural society can only exist if on certain issues you are absolutely clear that you're agreeing on that, and that you say, well, if you don't, then we have to maintain those rules. And I think in a practical way, it's very important in the Netherlands that people meet each other. You know, that if you are dehumanizing other people who are living in your society because you don't know them, you don't meet them on school, you don't see them on your work, then the dehumanization can be very strong. So it's very important that you don't have parts of town where only live people from an immigrant background. You know, you should have a mix everywhere, because people have to know each other. And you know, a lot of you talked about the right-wing people and the right. You know, it's interesting if you talk with people who vote for those kind of parties. It's interesting that they say, "Well, I'm against that or against this, but my neighbor is a good guy," and that's a start. That's a start, because you cannot. If you start, you see the other in the eye. It's a start, and at the same time, you have to take that person serious when he says, "When I walk on the street, I don't hear my own language. I can't understand them." Or I have a daughter, and she is not safe on the street by some guys who don't respect her privacy, or take that serious too. So. Avoid dehumanization in society, meet each other, don't have sex in different areas, meet each other on schools, that's a part, and be very explicit about certain rules you have in society to let a multicultural society work. Don't look away from that.
And last question.
Yeah, you already had the question, so first somebody. Go ahead. Yeah.
Let's have the two questions.
Yes.
The first is very technical. Did this movement start before or after the personal laws,
personal status?
Yeah, were controlled by the government or the church? Well,
I don't understand that.
Did the human movement start before or when the personal laws were controlled by the church or were controlled by the state? One.
Yeah.
Even if those laws were patriarchal and second, did it start before the democratic system was established or after the democratic system, even if it had laws? Yeah. Second. Third, you said you said the burqa, preventing the burqa would lead to further radicalization.
It's one of the theories in the debate.
Exactly, so it's the prejudice behind it. And could you please share with us
Yes, sorry. I will give those to the technical because otherwise I forget them. No, in 1811 to 200 years ago, there was an official separation between church and state. And in that century, democracy was established in 1919, even the women could vote. So and in 1946, 150 years later, the Humanist organization established. So there was already personal freedom, but there was not, there was in the law, there were still things that give privilege to religion, but not as strongly as it was before 1811. So that was different. And last about the burqa, you know, there are a lot of positions on a lot of theories. What would happen if you say no to the burqa in your law system? I didn't say that without purpose. That it's a flip discussion. That you can say, you know, you can flip just to the other, to the one side or to the other side. Me personally, I say, well, I think strategically, I'm principally against burqa. I think it's not good. It's my viewpoint. But I think at the end somebody can think differently from me, and that is flipping me to the side of allow it, but you can criticize it. Somebody else can make another, have another balance in that discussion. So that's my personal viewpoint. But of course, there's a lot of discussion about that. Hey.
Last question. You briefly talked about your personal freedom, of course, and also about freedom of expression. As a humanist, it's very important for you to have proper discussions with other believers, with other people in society, to protect your own personal views on these issues as well. My question is, how far do you think the freedom of speech in general as a concept might go or evolve into? For example, if you compare the Dutch freedom of speech system to another European country, France, where France has gone further down than the Dutch media, more or less, and this led to, for example, Charlie Hebdo, the cartoons and everything else. That's, of course, everybody knows what happens afterwards. So, how can you purposely insult somebody? What do you think about that as a humanist?
Yeah, what is an insult? You know, if you say I don't like your watch or something, or what a bad watch or what an ugly watch, it's insulting. If I say, well, I have another taste in watches, then it's softer, but I say the same thing. So of course you can differ in the way how you express something. But I don't want to say to anyone that they have to limit in the way they're expressing what their position about something is. Sometimes you have to be in the eyes of the person who is feeling insulted. It's necessary to do that. Sometimes the status quo is only opened with some sharpness. I can maybe with what is not religious but ideology. I was in China for a while ago, and I asked to a journalist who was working in China, how is censorship working in China? And she said, well, that's very good, a very interesting question. I will show you. And she showed a Chinese-controlled, by the state-controlled newspaper, and it was about some guy who was corrupt, who earned money, you know, and was corrupt. And he said, and she said, it's on page 5. See, this is censorship because it was put on page 5. And I said, well, that's not censorship. You know, it's page 5. I was a politician. I wanted to be on page 1 all the time. You know, so that's the freedom of a newspaper to not put that on the front page. He said, yeah, I agree with you. But if I want to make the same article about this guy who was very corrupt tomorrow, I cannot do that. And if I have to do it again and again and again, until the moment that he will be sacked and will be prosecuted, then the system works, then people say, yeah, it was already in the newspaper. You could be critical about this guy, but now you're radical. Now you are just want to have a fight, and you're just not very nice, and you're a radical. That's what's happening there. Why is that the same as Charlie Hebdo in a way? Because sometimes you have to be nasty as a journalist, or as a critic, or like a philosopher, to get to the bottom of something. And sometimes you have to change reality, bad things, to put this corrupt guy every day on the front page of the newspaper until justice is done. And of course, not all the things that are drawn and are said are having this goal and will have that goal, and sometimes it's just childish. But we have to accept that there's a lot of childish opinions and drawings in our society. But sometimes to be nasty, to be consistent, to be say no, persuasive, to go on where everybody says, oh no, this is not nice, it's not cozy, it's not good anymore. Can you say that in a more friendly way? Sometimes it's very important to be not friendly, to go on and to say it's bad, it's bad. It's comparable with the FIFA boss. What was his name? Sepp Blatter. There were constantly there were journalists who were saying he is doing that bad. And at the end of the day, the system broke and he resigned. And it was not very nasty. It was very, it was going on constantly. It was not, it was maybe a little bit radical of this journalist. And at the end of the day, justice is done. So, in a free society, it's sometimes necessary to be a little bit not cozy, to shake up things. Yeah. Thank you so much. Oh, you have a last question? Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
I want to come back to the what do you call it? The burqa, yeah.
Burqa, yeah.
Yeah. I think the main problem we have with the burqa is that your face, your whole body is expressing a lot of what you think and what you want. Our arms, the way we move, the expression on our face, it relates. I mean, if I'm talking to you, I just hear a voice. It doesn't mean as much as when I see you. So it takes away something of your, not of your personality, but the reflection of your personality.
I totally agree with you.
So that's why personally I am against the burqa, and I think it should be forbidden.
Yeah.
Because why should you hide yourself from your neighbor, from your...
Yeah, you have a viewpoint about that.
Yeah, but that's completely against the whole point of freedom and liberty.
But as we said, there is a limit to freedom.
But it's my choice. If it's my choice to wear it, then who is there to tell me not to wear it?
Yeah.
Well, of course there's a limit to it when it harms someone else.
Yeah.
When it harms someone else. And if there is an unease, that's not enough reason to say you can ban it. Because unease, I'm uneasy constantly by all kind of things. But if it's dangerous because somebody can hide himself. For example, in the traffic, if you are in the traffic and you drive your car with a burqa, it's a kind of danger because you cannot make contact. If you walk into a shop and you're hiding your face, it's easier to rob a country. So that's why you cannot wear a helmet in a shop. So in those kind of specific situations, I can say you cannot have a burqa or a hat or something. So. And those kind of things, you're hurting somebody else's in freedom or in, a real that you cannot be identified. But then we have this small piece of public space, and then you can say, well, if you're not in somebody's shop and you're where do you flip it? And I can totally understand where you say, at the end of that discussion, I say, no, we have to forbid it. Yeah, and I say, well, on this moment, I can change my mind about that. But on this moment, I would also, from strategic reasons, I will say, well, for that, on that specific spot in public space, I would say, you know, okay, for the time being, maybe. Yeah, it's a very different, and also a little bit, you know, in the Netherlands we have only like 50 or 100 of those people who are on the street. So it's in the Netherlands it's limited. But I think, speaking from individual freedom, it wouldn't be the reason to do or not do it. You know, you have to make a principled choice in that. Last one, yeah, because this is a good discussion. Go ahead. Yeah.
I want to go back to the horizontal freedom you were mentioned in your PowerPoint, and the example of the Muslim guy that was discriminated by the community that he belongs to.
Yeah.
So from a humanistic point of view, do you respect the laws that they've put? It's like, it's their thing, but we're not going to interfere, or do you have a more of a paternalistic approach to the situation, especially in the Netherlands?
How do you mean?
All right, so that Muslim guy is being discriminated by his group that he belongs to for opening a wine bar in the Netherlands.
It was a she, by the way. Yeah.
So, do the humanists approach such issue from respecting what those communities doing inside their boundaries, or they adopt, let's say, a policy or like an approach that advises the Muslim community how to act in such a situation?
Well, that's very simple. We are in favor of personal freedom. So if this Muslim woman says, I'm a Muslim, but I want to have a wine bar, then she has the total right to do that. And she doesn't have to explain that to a community or something. There's no parallel law system. That's, you know, maybe in the church, you know, if a Catholic church says there is no women allowed to be a priest, you know, that's the law inside the church. But if you step out of the church, we have equal rights. So if a Muslim woman says, you know, I'm a Muslim, but I'm a very free-thinking liberal Muslim, and I want to have a wine bar, you know, go ahead. You have the freedom of religion is not a freedom to be part of the group or something. You are a freedom for yourself. You can make, if you have your own kind of view on being a Muslim, that's your personal freedom. No other Muslim can, or whatever who he or she is, can impose her or his view on being a Muslim to her. She has the fundamental right to make her own little Islam, or not, or whatever. That's the freedom of religion is not a group right. It's an individual right, and that's the base of it. So we support, of course, this woman. And if you, as a Muslim, don't want to go to the wine bar, of course, don't go. Yeah, that's the freedom. Yeah.
Very good. And this positive note, I want to thank you again, Mr. Vanderham, Boris, for this very interesting and very, challenging ideas coming on the table. But really, I think we had a beautiful discussion with the participants. And if you have any other concerns, any other issue to discuss, any other idea, we can
recipes for good menus.
We can talk informally with Boris. I think we're taking him out now for a drink, and you're free to join, and you're free not to join.
You're obliged.
And we're free not to pay for you. But so thank you again for this really very exciting talk today, and join me in thanking you for